Guys, it's been 12 days on the nose since we did the Wilmington Whiteface 100. And I don't know about you guys, but it probably took me 8 days, maybe 7 days to fully physically recover. Do you guys feel about the same? Did it take you that whole next week to get your bodies back to life?
Well, to be honest, you then ruined yourself again on day 7.
True. With new perspective, though, from Whiteface, which we'll dive into. Was your body as beat up? John, let me start with you. Was your body as beat up as your ego from this thing? Did you feel, what do you think took the bigger hit?
So
5 hours, 30 minutes.
Yeah. So certainly for me, it was more ego than it was anything. I mean, so if we dive into the moment of the night before, and we're all sitting around analyzing past year's numbers, and I remember this very vividly because I'm like, we're totally going to do 5.5 hours. Like it's in the bag. And the way I came up with it is that we looked at the 40 to whatever age group, and then I took like the top 50%, and they were in that like 5:45 range or something. And I'm like, well, we're fit guys. We work out, we eat right, we train. Like, no chance we're going to be in the bottom 50%. It's impossible. So 5:30, that's what it's all about.
I think when we had that conversation, we were taking off time in half-hour chunks as the conversation went on. And I think the more caffeine we had, and that was a problem.
Yep. And then for me, I think I was at hour marker 4, and then I blew up. And we'll talk about that eventually, what that meant. But yeah, no, a newfound respect for endurance athletes that are trained and focused on that sport of mountain biking, and a new understanding of what a 5-mile hill is. I've never experienced that either.
Yeah, I've never seen one of those. That's all right. Rob, how are you doing kind of post-race recap? Have you had kind of the, resetting of your mental thermostat from this event? We'll get in a second to like what we all did prior leading up to the event, because we're all coming from a little different background. But how do you feel after? Do you feel encouraged? Do you feel down and beat up by it? Do you feel pretty pumped about how you did?
I feel pretty pumped. I mean, I went through a lot of challenges in that race as well, with the body just starting to crap out on me. And it's funny because I remember also the night before we were like, there's this 6-hour, kind of time in our head. And we actually started asking ourselves, like, where did the 6 hours come from? And I think it was the same thing, like looking at the 50 percentile and being like, oh, that's roughly where we would be at. And, I think body wise, it was pretty painful. It took the legs probably 3 to 4 days to feel somewhat normal, walk somewhat normal. I already walk kind of funny, so it's, I had an excuse. I didn't do anything whatsoever, like do another race like somebody did 7 days after. I didn't do anything. So I just took the time, let the body heal. Mentally though, it was amazing. Like being able to look back, and the fact that, to persevere through it was pretty awesome. I think the big takeaway that I learned, other than doing an endurance event, you really, really have to put the time in the saddle for something like biking, or if it's swimming or whatever it is. Like, you've got to do that discipline, and you've got to do it a lot, similar to or more than the amount of time that you're actually doing it in the race. And I think the main takeaway I had is you can't just be in great shape. Like, this wasn't a slouch race. Like, pretty much everybody that was in this race was a mountain bike endurance athlete that did this. So our idea of going in being like, oh, 50 percentile, we should be there. No way, dude. Not that kind of race, man. All of these people were experienced.
For sure. And I think we all had this conversation the next day, that if it's a race that's, flat and fast, whether it's on foot or on bike, you're racing the person next to you. And if you're having a bad day, or the race is a little too long to meet your goal pace, you can gear down and still finish with no problem. And this was not one of those, right? We were not only racing the people next to us, we're trying to, but you're battling the course itself and the terrain and the 5-mile hills, as John said. And it's just a different animal, So let's dive into how we prepped for this, not to get into all the details, but we came from different angles, I think, Rob, you versus John and I. Rob, start with you. Tell me what you were doing kind of the 6 months prior. I mean, I don't think you got a ton of notice on this, right? John looped you in. What was that? Probably 3-4 months prior, but you had already been riding your bike a lot and you've had a past injury that kept you from doing other modes. So this has been your main mode for a while, right?
Yeah, so I've got a fused right ankle after an injury about, almost 20 years ago now. So pretty much my endurance or cardio, preference of choice is cycling, mainly oddly on Peloton. So I've done lots of different Peloton challenges, riding 200 miles in less than 12 hours, doing some other types of endurance things on Peloton, and have certainly gotten out and done a lot more biking on my gravel. More recently, getting the mountain bike. I think I actually had the mountain bike built about 2 months prior to the race, and just started getting out there and, hitting the trails on that. I should have just gone to Walmart, because apparently if you go to Walmart and get a mountain bike, you just perform a lot better. But yeah, so I mean, I had done quite a lot of time in the saddle, nothing like this. I mean, maybe once every 4 weeks or so, I might have done like a 2 or 3 hour ride, but not consistently, not doing 100 miles a week, not doing anything even remotely close to what is, demanded for this type of event.
Yeah, for sure. So John, why don't you dive into, I mean, you and I kind of prep pretty similar, but you've had a lot of cross training you've been doing lately. You've got much more on your plate with different modes. So you were trying to balance a couple of different things, right? Running related goals and races coming up versus biking. Want to dive into a little bit of that?
Right. So, we kind of joked and called ourselves the weekend warriors, when we were out, and, fit guys that can kind of jump on any mode and hold our own. So this year, the early year focus was upper body strength for an obstacle course race. I've always made fun of all those people. I didn't think it was a real race. I'm like, it's just you run around and crawl in the mud, sissies. It's not a big deal. So then I did it, and it was hard, humbling, almost as humbling as this one was. So lots of upper body strength, some running. And we would get, an hour intense zone 4 effort Thursday. And then we'd probably get a long-ish ride, let's call it 90 minutes to 2 hours on a weekend, mostly on my road bike, which is in my basement on a CompuTrainer. And you and I, Ryan, we did a 40-mile mountain bike ride. It took us about 6 hours. We had 30 minutes of rest roughly sprinkled throughout. And I finished that one and I felt fine. I wasn't tired. The next day I was 100% fine. But I think what we learned, so I learned really 2 primary things. One is the mountain biking courses that we have in our area. It's pedal, 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 coast, 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 right? Pedal, 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 pedal. And then the hills might be 1 minute hills, tops probably. And then, bombing down the other side. So you're not pedaling constantly for long. And Whiteface was constant pedaling, with exception of a few big downhills, right? So think 5.5 hours of straight pedaling instead of minute on, 90 seconds off pedaling in our local backyard. So that was one thing. The other thing I learned is that putting in the time in the saddle on the specific piece of equipment that you're going to use, right? Biking isn't just biking. So I have a triathlon Cervelo, like racing bike in my basement, and that the geometry, you're kind of like pushed forward quite a bit because the goal is aero, and mountain bike hits completely different muscles. So it's like a different muscle set, kind of like internal adductors and everything else. I think with the like pedal and seat position, lifting leg up higher, pushing down more, kind of broke me, and I recognized that very, very quickly. It was probably the first hill was probably 25 minutes, 30 minutes in is when things started twinging and firing. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be feeling this way this early in the race.
Yeah, that's a riot. Now, just so everybody knows, we didn't go into this thing cocky. Our time might have been off, right, with our guesstimated finishing time. But we were talking about pacing strategy the night before and morning of. You get so fired up pre-race, you get your coffee in the morning. We're listening to David Goggins, right, on YouTube. And we get up to the start of the race and you want to just hammer out at zone 4, knowing you're going to be there half a day. We held back, right? Did you guys, let's dive into like actual race strategy and how we felt physically. Rob, back to you. When you started that race, I think you started, we got kind of mixed up in that starting lane. When you came out, were you conscious about heart rate? Were you looking at any metrics and holding back, knowing it was going to be a big day and a lot of climbing?
Yeah, I was. So I had a computer. I had a little Wahoo Elements kind of right out in front of my handlebars. So the idea was to, keep my cadence or RPMs around 75 to 80. Because I've noticed that, the higher I go, like once I get up to around 85, 90 from previous riding, like it really pushes my heart rate up by about 10. So I was going to try to keep that to around 145 max. And try to stay as much as possible, out of zone 4, at least what I refer to as my zone 4, and really try to keep it to ideally zone 2, but probably more likely zone 3. Definitely did not do a good job at that. I think going back, I think I pulled up Strava and I was in zone 4 almost the entire thing. It was nuts. Heart cadence wise, I did really well. I think I ended up learning very early on, because you do learn as you're going into this race, having done it for the first time, that the tires that I had on my bike definitely played a big factor in speed. The first big downhill that we hit, I just noticed like no effort because you're just spinning out with these hills. I mean, they're so big that you have to turn around and climb them. I probably had about 5 miles per hour, if not more, on some people, just because my tires weren't as beefy. They weren't as knobby. Now that definitely challenged me in some of the single track stuff. They ended up being a lot slippier. I fell a lot of times, but on those downhills, I noticed that I just had really great speed. So my strategy started to become kind of be a little bit more plotty on the uphills. When they were large uphill stretches, like the 5 mile climbs that we were doing, I would take it nice and easy until like maybe the last mile to half a mile. And then in my head, psychologically, I knew, okay, I can push a little bit harder, which for me meant get out of granny gear, go up a gear, maybe 2 gears, use a little bit more of the muscles, less cardio, slow the cadence down. And I just found myself starting to, pull away from some people, use a little bit more effort at the tail end of that climb, because then I would have that rest factor and still be able to catch people on the downhill. And that seemed to work pretty well, but 20 miles into the ride, like my legs were starting to give out, and I realized that I had to just keep spinning in order to keep my legs from completely seizing up. So, that strategy might have worked for maybe the first half of it, but the second half of it, I was just really struggling just to keep the legs moving.
And you guys remember when the race director was giving the talk the day before, telling everybody to just calm it down out of the gates? What did he say? Mile 30 is when the race starts, and you still have at least an hour of straight climbing after that? So that was kind of stuck in my head. Yeah. I think I wrote that on my arm for the race. Hold up. John, did you come out of the gates holding back a little bit? I know we kind of failed a little bit. We were trying to ride together in the beginning and draft off each other, and got a little hectic there, and we kind of lost each other. But did you? Go ahead.
Oh, it's interesting. So I think we had 3 different tire treads amongst all of us, right? Rob had the leanest, yours in the middle, and I had, big knobby, no chance I fall
super
off.
swampers.
Yeah. And but we tried. So on the downhills, everyone pulled way away from me. And I had to actually try to spin to catch up. But then if you're spinning out, you're not going to catch up. So, but it was pretty crazy. Heart rate was high the first hour. And it didn't feel like it should be. I think it was, I don't know if it was the energy that was jacking me up a little bit. Yeah. But my heart rate was hotter than I wanted it to be for most of the race. Like if I was trying to say, hey, stay, mid 140s for me is like middle zone 3. It was a little hotter. But then now that I've had time to kind of go back and think more about the race itself, I honestly think you can do a lot higher, right? Like I think going back, I would do really high zone 3, low zone 4 for the big hills and train accordingly. And then, coast the downhills, right? Work them properly. But I noticed that the real cyclists, I think they hit the hills a little harder. than I thought. I found myself wanting, I mean, I was pulling back a little bit for different reasons later in the race from cramping, but even early on, I kept looking at my heart rate. And I'm like, man, it's 160 and you're going uphill, dial it back, dial it back. So I found myself pushing myself to dial back even more in the early part of the race. I don't know if that, looking back, was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of different factors. Like one of the things that makes this so different too from the mountain biking that we're used to is that some of those grades were so steep, you didn't have an option. It was either you're in zone 4 or you fall over because you're doing 2 miles an hour, right? So you don't have a choice. So I remember being very conscious of that with that first climb. Like, okay, watching my heart rate, want to be in the 140s, maybe I want to cap it at 155, can't burn any matches early. And then I'm clicking down and there are no more gears left. I'm like, damn, no more gears and heart rate still climbing. And then I hear you clowns in the back. Hey, Morrissey, we're coming for you.
Coming to get you.
Yeah. And then about 30 seconds later, when you felt that same hill, maybe not.
We're fine back here.
Yeah, at least made some people around us laugh.
Oh, that was awesome.
I changed my mind.
So, Rob, when we're in the race, when and if, maybe it didn't, but when did stuff start to sink in that this was a bigger feat than maybe we expected? Or when did you start to either deal with some mental demons or the physical, limitations started to come out? When did you have that like, uh-oh moment?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm actually, just as you guys were talking, I just pulled up my Strava analysis and I was looking at heart rate and speed and cadence. And, we hit the first big hill around like mile, 5, but that wasn't even the biggest climb. That ended up being more around, I guess it's like mile 13, I think, was when that first big one started. And it went all the way up to
13
like
to
mile 20.
20.
It was almost like a 7-mile climb. I mean, it's just crazy. Granny gear for a lot of that 7 miles.
I mean, real quick, to give people perspective, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, just so like people understand. I think, and again, I'm not the top-notch rider out there, but I think that 7-mile block of climbing, right? It's all slow speed, was 40 minutes. That took me about 40 minutes. So you're grinding.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It is so tough. I think the first time was when, because I think I remember telling you, you might even remember the exact words, like I actually passed you on one of those hills. And I think what I told you was kind of what my strategy was, right? Like I see that there's this big, long downhill coming up ahead. I'm going to push a little harder this last mile or something. So I felt kind of cocky. I was like, oh yeah, cool. I got this. I'm going to be ahead. Then I'm going to rock the downhill. See you guys. And it didn't work out that way. Clearly.
Yeah. You blew my doors off like I was standing still. And I think you actually slapped me on the ass as you came by. And then we saw you a couple miles later.
Yeah, I think it was the I think it might have been the first small hill. I don't think it was the 7-mile climb that I did that on. I think it was that first little hill. Maybe. Some of this is a little, blurry. My mind doesn't want to remember it. But yeah, I think it was that first big climb where I was like, holy shit, we're like not even a third of the way through this. Yeah. And it's already this tough,
Yeah. John, when did the snake bite for you? I mean, yours was pretty black and white here. You don't have to think too hard about this one, right? You're muted, buddy.
So there's a friend of ours named Ryan Paquin, and we had a mountain bike race last summer, again, going in thinking that we're going to run our age groups. And we got slammed by like 12-year-olds. And so then I'm videotaping Ryan as he's finishing, and literally right ahead of the finish line, his calves cramp up. I've never witnessed that before. It's never happened to me before, and I've never seen it happen to anyone before. I'm like, how in the world could he just stop? Like, the finish line is right there. Like, pedal. So that's my only experience in cramping in life. Now, fast forward to that mile 13 to 20. My VMOs, like this part of my knee, just little twitches every single push down, muscles firing weird. And I'm like, that's just, something's not going on right here. So then fast forward all the way to the turnaround. So maybe we're at mile 30 and it's the single track, the first single track.
Mm-hmm.
And I pass a woman. And one thing that she passed me very quickly after. One thing you'll learn about the race though, is everyone is so damn nice. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So every single person that would pass would be interested. Like, are you okay? Do you need anything? So I did that. Hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? And she said, I just got some cramps. I'm like, oh man, that's gotta suck. And then I remembered Paquin. It wasn't but a minute later that I had to jump off my bike because both of my VMOs seized up. And I'm like, oh God, what is this? I'm like, massaging it out. So then you come out of that single track and then you've got the big climb, right? It's like almost immediately. And I met this guy, Enrique, from the Dominican Republic, and he was a good climber, but hated single track. So I got to talk to him for a little bit. And he was like, how's it going? I'm like, I've got these weird cramps. Never had them before. I think I'm under control. Almost right when I said that, that's when the series of things, it was right leg, left leg. Then as I try to get off the bike, right hamstring, fall down. I just can't do anything for about 45 minutes. And wanted to quit many, many, many times. What I've learned about cramping though, grind it out, like, right, need the muscle, rest, walk it out a little bit. Eventually things calm down. So, just sort of found the mental strength to kind of push through and take that fine line between pushing so hard that the muscle breaks again, versus just pushing it and letting it fire all kinds of weird. So I just laid in that all kinds of weird for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. And so people know, like, that race kind of chewed you up as far as cramping. You got a ton of variables that happened prior to that race that we think were some mechanical causes. I don't know if that's public knowledge yet, so you tell me if I can't talk about that. But you're a fit dude. It's not like, you just got off the couch and you bought the Walmart bike that I have and you showed up at a bike race, right? Like, you're running sub 20-minute 5Ks, mountain biking pretty fast. You just got a lot of variables that, that might have thrown you off with mechanics. And like you said, this is the first time you've had experience with that. I mean, your nutrition was pretty dialed. We obviously did not know the terrain and have some changes to do for sure moving forward for mountain bike racing like this. But to have that happen so early, man, that was just a game changer for you. And that pretty tough mental struggle to battle through. It was impressive.
Yeah. I have a newfound respect for a lot of the, you get athletes that, not that I'm anywhere close to this kind of thing, but I resonate with it. They go to the Olympics and they're about to have like the race of their life. And then they cramp midway through, or they strain a muscle or something. And that feeling of like that empty, oh my God, I just did all this training. I drove all the way up here. I've been looking forward to this for however many months, and I'm a failure, right? Like that level of like weird, not depression, but kind of, that sets in really fast. It's a hard thing to overcome. But then realizing like lots of races for like street people, right? Like we're not like qualifying for, things where it's like, this is my shot. I got another shot. I'm going to sign up and do it again next year. And I keep saying, like, get even with that course. Yeah. But it is definitely the mental side of racing is almost more important than the fitness that you have going into it. And that's been my big thing this year, is learning how to focus on that. I think my body's in pretty good shape. Mentally is where I maybe fall apart sometimes, right? If it's really hard, and you see this in my training and Training Peaks or whatever, but that last interval or second to last interval, my mind wants to tell me, stop working so hard. This sucks. This hurts. You can't do this. And I think what I took out of this race is, yeah, you can. Every one of my workouts since, I'm not shortchanging anything, and I'm laying it all out. But it's like, that's the big lesson I taught myself in that race is, and what does Goggins say? That when you think you're done, you're only 40% there. And I actually believe that now, because I think I was at that point where I wanted to tap out, but I still finished another 30 miles of a pretty demanding.
Yeah, you were almost at 40% into the race when your body failed. So that's pretty accurate. Well, big lesson learned. And I think the course kind of forced that on you. You can't back out. You can't make the interval easier. You still had to climb an additional, what, 5,000 feet after you cramped up. So kudos to you, man.
I remember saying, like, I literally was trying to call people to quit. And
I got the text.
There was no cell service. It's like, I'm like out in the middle of nowhere. Everyone's already past me. There's no one behind me at this point. And I'm just like, what am I going to, I can't even walk up to the top of the hill. I finally tried to clip in and everything started seizing up again. And then I went down the hill with like legs flopping in front, it was awful. And so, but luckily my cell phone never got reception. And then I got to the aid station. And I remember there was something that when I did that 29029 event where it's like you climb Everest, Jesse Itzler said, finish like a champion. And then he also said, one more step. Mm-hmm. And like, when it gets really hard, just take one more step. So then that's kind of what my thing was, right? One more aid station, get to the next one, finish like a champion. So there's like definitely some recurring things that I said to myself to kind of get you to the other side.
Yeah. When you have that much time alone with yourself, it's a lot of time in your own head. You got to come up with some good stuff there. Right. So when you say finish like a champion, you know, I'll try to splice the video into this, but you did look like it when you finished. I mean, at first, like, was John just pulling our leg? Did he just do like an easy zone one ride around town and then come in the finish? Cause you look like it was no big deal. Well, I was expecting like your leg and your camelback, you know, dragging it along.
So it wasn't demanding, right? It's just my muscles weren't working. Yeah. So feeling wise, I was fine. I mean, I've walked like a paraplegic, I think, for a couple of days, but like, you know, you guys saw me walking through downtown Placid.
Use that term loosely.
It didn't look pretty, but it was, but like energy, heart, like all the metrics that you would look at to measure being tapped, I didn't hit any of those. Mm-hmm. So I felt fine, except for the parts of my body that weren't working.
And I think your brother was on the opposite side of all that. I think he bested us on metrics everywhere. So we had most time in zone 4 ever. We had top speed. Am I right saying this? You hit 50 miles an hour on the downhill?
Yeah, that's where I wish I would have had a GoPro. I think I hit 50.3, and there was like so that big 7-mile climb, I think it was the downhill of that, or maybe not, I forget at this point, but I know it was on pavement, and then there was the nasty gravel section that we had to originally ride up. That was pretty gnarly. We got to go down that, and I think I hit like 40 something through there. And I was just, so I've ridden enough on that bike, to John's earlier point, like, do the thing that you like, you need to have comfort in what you're doing and have lots of time in that in order to be confident. And I had ridden it enough downhill on some pretty gnarly stuff where I just had full confidence in my suspension and my setup, to where I wasn't necessarily concerned about anything that was in front of me, anything in the way. I was just going to blast it. So I just kind of just let the bike do its thing, kept straight. One of the other benefits of, at least for me, having the computer was I could kind of tell. And if I didn't have it, I know for a fact I would have been in big trouble. But I could kind of look down and I had the route. So whenever I was climbing, or where I was really worried about metrics, I had a screen that showed me my heart rate, my cadence, etc. But if I was ever blasting downhill, I would always have the route up, because I could see kind of right down in front of me without taking my eye too far off the road if there was a big left turn or right turn coming up. So I knew appropriately when to slow down. Because if you're going 40 or 50, it doesn't matter how far you can visually see, like, you've got to be able to plan in advance. So there was definitely a few turns where if I didn't have that computer, I would have killed myself.
Real quick, I remember going down that first hill and like people were just flying by me. And finally one guy goes, "Stop hitting your brake." He just kept going. I was terrified. I'm not used to like believing in the suspension, but I must have said, "Oh shit," like no joke, 500 times out loud while I'm like standing up and eyes bugged out. I'm like, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." It was, for me, it was pretty intense going down that hill.
That first gravel downhill, like you're talking about, Rob. So to paint the picture, I think we had the opposite experience. So I had no bike computer, no heads up on turns, no rear suspension, had the Huffy out there. And I think I went through the rosary like 10 times on that downhill. So every turn, I mean, I didn't hit 50 on that, but I think I was like high 30s on the gravel. And I don't know about you guys, but I was just getting like bucked all over the place. It was like riding a horse.
Yeah.
And then turn comes up, you're trying not to skid. You know, you can't really brake that much because it's loose. That was just, my heart rate did not lower on the downhill due to just the anxiety of the whole time of hanging on. And I don't know about you guys, but were you trying to also get aerodynamic? Like, were you trying to tuck in or, yeah, Rob was, John, you were.
Yeah.
I was trying to put my lats out to slow down.
I'm looking at my heart rate. My heart rate was like low to mid 150s going downhill. So, I mean, it's not a lot. I mean, cardio wise, you're not getting a lot of rest on those when you're moving that fast. So that even takes away, you know, a little bit, you know, more of the recovery that you could be having.
Yeah. By the end of that race, those downhills were wearing me out as much as the uphills, like forearms, wrist, neck, traps. I mean, I know it's all user error, but any muscle left you're trying to recruit to just survive the downhills. Yeah, it was awesome. That was a beatdown. So Rob, what are next steps for you? You know, John talked to us about, you know, what it took mentally to get him through that. And, you know, I think that was a big win for you, John, although, you know, you're not pumped about the race ending, but what you take from that is going to help you in upcoming races and events. And hopefully this got you over that little obstacle. Rob, do you feel the same? Did this kind of reset what you think of as a hard event? And what do you have coming up next? How are you going to use this to your benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway is like the mental toughness, right? Like having this under our belt, you know, like John said, you know, getting 40% into a race and realizing you think that you can't do anymore and then you finish the other 60%, that's huge because now mentally, you know, you can push yourself that much further. Well, guess what? That further that you could push yourself, there's still another 40% to go. So I think from a mental standpoint, having been through it is just absolutely huge. I think that, you know, my big takeaway was definitely hydration. You know, I think we did a good job of prepping what we needed to do when we hit our first aid station at the 20K mark, which was technically, you know, a little bit earlier. Well, no, 40K mark was where we had the drop bags. So technically it's not yet quite halfway through, but, you know, I had a full Camelback with 2 liters and I had proper hydration in there and I had 25% of it left at that drop. So I know the cramping that I went through in my legs, you know, probably that started around the 20-ish mile mark, was probably due to that, just not hydrating enough, not getting enough going on in the body to sustain. But in terms of like next steps, like, you know, like I said, I do a lot of the Peloton stuff. So there's like a Peloton challenge I'm doing right now just to, you know, help raise my FTP up a bit. But I'm committed to doing a lot more endurance biking, definitely getting out and doing a lot more, you know, 2, 3, 4 hour rides just to get more time in the saddle. You know, there's a potential race later this year that we were, you know, possibly talking about doing. So it would be awesome to get one more under the belt, endurance mountain bike event by the end of the year. And I think we also have a certain race that we're planning for next year as well.
Oh, can we talk about that? We want to hold on to that a little bit?
Man.
I don't want to hold on to it. That's going to be awesome. So I'd hobble in to get a beer during the awards thinking like, I don't even want to hear any of this stuff. And then I come out and I see Ryan walking over with a gold coin and he wins the lottery for Leadville. And I'm like, oh my God, that is awesome. And so in my mind, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to do this. And I spend time looking on there and I heard you could take a course, or you could do all this stuff maybe, and you could get a guaranteed spot in some way. And we found some charities that we can support that I believe we get guaranteed spots in. So hopefully the 3 of us are lining up on that Leadville line sometime in August of 23. Huge
bucket lister. The official email came through the other day and I didn't even want to open it yet. I'm like, I can't handle that. It's going to be a big deal. Yeah, we got a lot of work cut out for us, boys.
You know what's interesting for the people, you know, that are watching this, at least locally up here, you know, we have a neat trail system because you have Bacon Ridge and Waterworks. And then you have some decent roads as far as like roads in between. And I'm just even thinking of future training would have been more forced long, like road training on the mountain bike riding and then mixing in single track. So think of going at Bacon Ridge, doing a loop, and then jumping on the roads, ending up on Waterworks, do a loop, ride back over to Bacon, do a loop. Like you could get into that point where you're getting some good 3-hour rides and you're mixing in extended pedaling with some single track. So I'm actually genuinely excited about some of the training that we can at least do locally. And we haven't even tapped into Patapsco yet. So anyone watching this, it's like a Patapsco genius, please reach out to us and we'd love to ride with you.
We need a tour guide.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to keep rolling with the Huffy for another 6 months, and then we'll make a decision from there. So don't hate.
All the people at Leadville seem to have had hardtails. They said, all the research I've done at least says that the bulk of the people that are trying to really compete, if their butt can take it, has a hardtail, but they say they recommend rear suspension for comfort. So I think you should just go back to your teeth chattering on that. So that Leadville has a 10-mile, 3,000-foot climb. And then once you get to the top of the mountain, you turn around and you bomb down it, which looks insane. Like I'm going to be scared. And I think that climb.
And by the way, you're already at 8,000 plus feet. So like altitude wise, like it's demanding. It's gonna be,
I think that one goes 10 to 13, 10,000 feet to 13,000 feet.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's a big deal. All right, glad we have 14 months, right?
Hey, Ryan, let me ask you a question. So the times were essentially 6:30, 6:36, and 7:56 for I broke 8 hours. But like, what was the point? So when I was broken and getting ready to go down, it was right around 5:30. And then what was depressing me even more is I was like, yeah, Ryan's probably finishing right now. But like, what was that time where you were like, wow, this is going to be a lot longer than we thought? Like, was there a moment that triggered, or not really?
Yeah, mine came in a little later. So I think, similar to what you guys talked about, like holding the throttle back early. I was trying to do that too. I get caught up. I have a hard time doing negative splits, in life. So come out a little too hot, but I was definitely monitoring heart rate, was trying to gear down. I think I rode the beginning of the race pretty smart. Once we got down that gravel, and then did that next big climb, I knew that after that second big climb took me an hour. And that was a big deal. After that, I knew that we had additional climbs, but nothing that long. I made a very conscious decision, and I probably was a little too intense about it, but I raced the 40 to 52 mile segment. Whereas before that, it was, I'm going to pace this. This is a big ultra endurance effort. And then as soon as I hit 40 miles, like I went up 5 to 10 beats and just hammered down, and I burned up too much fuel. And then when I hit 52, I wouldn't say it bonked, but that's when it hit me that legs were just not going to handle that kind of effort. And I was a little behind on water and food. I think it might've been on like one of the single track times I just wasn't taking in water, and maybe the long extended downhill, time just kind of flew by where I got a little behind. So at that 52 mile mark, I started to get deep in the pain cave, and then I just got worse. And I don't know how much I actually slowed up. I do know I felt like more and more dog shit. Like I just went real deep into the cave late. And that 60 to 68 mile range just felt like it lasted 5 hours for me. So when I hit mile 55-ish, looking at the clock, I was trying to play the clock games with myself. Like, all right, if I hold this pace, I'll make it in 6 hours. And then I missed that, and it just started to go downhill. So that's when it turned into more of a survival. Like I had the conscious switch of endure early, race 40 to whatever. And then when that switch got flipped off, then it was just survival. We got to just get this done and not cramp. And that was the kind of 52 to 68 mile mark. So that's kind of where my head was at for that.
And I think all of us, so then let's talk about the single track for a second at the very, very, very end, because it definitely had a mind game for me. So remember, I'm looking at my clock thinking I've got to make 8 hours, and now I'm feeling good about myself. I'm like, I'm actually going to do this. And right when you go into the single track, like the first single track that I thought was the only single track, then you hit that weird Did any of you get off your bike there where like you went into the stream and didn't even look like a path?
Yep,
I did
took
too.
the left.
I didn't go into the stream.
No? You just stayed
I
on
didn't
like
even go in the stream. I tried staying on that little trail, and then it was all overgrown. I was like, did I take a wrong turn? And then I heard people in the stream going by me, and I was like, oh shit, you're supposed to be in the stream.
Yeah. I was trying to stay in the place I was in, and there were a couple guys behind me that I was trying to hold off, and there was one person in front of me I was trying to reel in. And I came in there pretty hot, and there was a tourist, there was somebody hiking. And I almost went down, like steering away from them. And I went left of that stream, had to get off my bike. The three guys behind me come bombing by. And that was very deflating. And then back on the bike, back in the single track. And that single track was nasty as you got deeper into it.
Yeah, the first set wasn't hateful. And I actually felt good. And then I got to that the rock path that led up to what I thought was the final parking lot. And then I couldn't make it up that. Wheels are spinning out because rocks were everywhere. And then I remember getting up to that little part. And the day before, we were looking at where people finish. And I'm like, oh my God, I made it. I'm looking at the clock. Like, this is awesome. Pedaling, I start pedaling harder. And then we're right where I think it's going to go down to the finish. It goes right back into more single track. And I was not happy.
Yeah.
I think I felt 3 really pretty epic falls that would have been amazing on video in that last, I mean, what was it? It couldn't have been more than a mile.
Probably 2 miles, but it took forever.
Was it? Yeah.
Awful.
Well, it was a tease when you heard the music. You heard the music at the after party, and you think you're right there, like right through this tree line, and we're going to be done. And you're absolutely, I don't know about you guys, I mean, crushed. And they hit us with those really short but really steep hill climbs right at the end where you're barely keeping your bike upright. And then to know you have to go back in and do more technical single track was just a beatdown.
Yeah. And I think we all fell at the same location in that section, right? It was the big rock, the little rock wall. One was, I can't remember the one turn, but then I remember I had fallen 3 consecutive times. And then there was one where that big puddle at the bottom that I guess a good rider would have bunny hopped it, I think. Now that I'm watching more mountain bike videos, I think that's what they would have done to clear that. But I saw that and I just said, I'm out. And I just got off the bike and walked it over because I'm like, I'm not risking it.
Same deal, Rob. Yeah, that was a beatdown.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I was cursing mad. I was like, you've got to be, kidding me. Like this is like, if I'm those race directors, I would actually have hidden cameras just to watch people's reactions as they ended up seeing that. Cause it would be a great, like, candid camera, just watching people curse and be really upset.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that last hill before that last single track where it just kept, you'd see kind of the summit and then it would turn and you'd see more hill and then same thing. Then you'd turn, you'd see more hill. That was demoralizing to me. That was the very first time where I was like, I think I'm going to have to get off and walk. Not because it's tough single track that I can't have any traction in, but like, I literally don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it. I think my legs are going to give out. And I just kept moving,
Yeah. No. I must have gone through 4 gels in the last 20 minutes of that thing. Like just looking for something like caffeine. Give me something. Faster. Anything else you guys want to add about the race? All good? I think we covered it.
Other than, I mean, for anyone thinking of doing it, I mean, lodging was easy. People are insanely friendly. Not a lot of cars. I mean, it really is. It's an awesome event, but I don't feel like it is a casual, I bike twice a week with my friends race. I think it's a legit caliber athlete that shows up for those things. The women were awesome. Like some of the ladies I was able to talk to as they passed me. But they were just awesome. And they just would grind, right? And it's the kind of race where since you're not like, I did an Ironman race, so I thought this was going to be really easy for me. Like, I've done a 10-hour race before. But it's like, I remember doing that race and you could be side by side with someone and carry conversation because you're breathing hard, but you're not gassed, like completely. And there's a lot of good conversation. And, hey, where are you from? Oh, that's awesome. Like, back and forth and commiserating about the hills. So it was one of the friendliest events in one of the coolest locations. And then when we went out to the restaurants, the people were so insanely nice. Like just everything about that area really was like a good mental reset, and super enjoyable.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, great experience, great town. I mean, I think the crowd in the, mountain biking community, the trail community couldn't be any more friendlier. It was Southern hospitality up north, And I just want to kind of share one more thing for anybody watching this too, that maybe has some apprehension about doing something that's outside the comfort zone. Although we're joking about it because we're used to doing stuff that's hard for us and we kind of get a kick out of it, but only because we know the win comes after. The win is enduring, right? So the mental fortitude gained by doing things that are outside of your comfort zone is what kind of pays you back later on in life. And that can be related to anything. It can be workplace, it can be relationships, it can be life struggles, it can be future racing. And, if somebody is afraid to sign up for their first 5K, or maybe they do road running and they're afraid to do a trail run, know that the benefit you're going to get on the back end of it is 10 times the fear and anxiety that you're going to have prior to going into it. And that was a beatdown. I mean, that was the hardest thing I've done on a bike by far, and arguably the hardest thing I've ever done, right? And the next weekend I did an 80-mile gravel ride, and I raced it, and that was 5.5 hours, and it felt like I did a 10K road run in comparison. Like it wasn't the physical part. I mean, that was the hardest thing I had done on a bike if I didn't do Whiteface, but it was totally different mindset the next weekend, as it was so fresh in my mind of how bad that hurt, but knowing that no matter what, we still got it done, right? So what you can put yourself through. And then that 5.5 hour one, I could keep my head in the game the whole time. There was no downtime. There were no dead spots. It was just, all right, stay in your time, keep pushing, you got this. And it was a completely different experience. If I didn't do Whiteface, that would have just beat me up a little bit. So for all those thinking about doing something hard, get it done. You'll get a lot more out of it. So guys, thanks for hopping into this, both the call and the race, because I know I signed up for this thing and I floated it out to you, John, and you bit pretty quick, and I didn't know you were going to. And then somehow Rob's on his Peloton, gets a couple text messages, and he's roped into it. So appreciate the company. Shared a good weekend of suffering, and we got a lot out of it. So I look forward to what 2022 and 2023 bring.